Incoming transmission now.
Hey everybody, this is Jason Brazier and welcome to Voided Transmissions. Today's guest I'm very excited to have a good friend of mine, Sasha Daucus. She is a researcher and I would say, how'd you describe it? You are an expert on regional Ozark herbs. Is that pretty
Plants.
good?
Yeah,
Plants,
pretty
there
good.
we go. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for being here. And, so right now you're doing a lot of research for the Smithsonian, is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
So how did that come to be?
Well, it's really exciting. This summer in like the last weekend in June and the first weekend of July, the Smithsonian is putting on a festival, a folk life festival.
Mhm.
And they're one of their focuses is the Ozarks.
Mhm.
So it's a festival that's happened in Washington, D.C. for like 60 years.
Mhm.
And it's the first time that the Ozarks have ever been highlighted. And one of the areas that they wanted to talk about, they wanted to have a garden, a teaching garden that represents plants of the Ozarks. And they had heard about me as an expert on Ozark plants. I think, the film, Jason, that you did with My Ozarks really
Yes.
played a good role in that, because it really the Ozarks are so beautiful in that film. And then you placed me in a context that very quickly people can understand what I'm interested in and what I'm about. So I'm sure that film helped me get the job.
Well, I'm glad it did. And what Sasha is referencing is a kind of a documentary web series called My Ozarks that you can watch on YouTube. And I believe it was episode 6 that we did, was your episode. And it's a really great episode. I highly recommend watching every episode. But that one's really cool because we're going to talk about, is it Cupola Pond later? When we come to that. That's a fascinating tale. So let's backtrack a little bit too. So why hasn't the Smithsonian ever had anything about the Ozarks in their festival?
Well, what they said was that they very seldom focus on regions. They do states
Okay.
or they do other countries, but they don't do regions. They have done the Appalachians, but for some reason the Ozarks just came onto their radar, and they decided to do it in 2023. And then they connected with numerous people, but I was one of them that they connected with in relationship to my knowledge of plants. And I have a job interviewing. The first phase of the job was I was interviewing certain people who also are plant knowledge specialists in different ways. To, first of all, it's just also it's a research project that will get archived with the Smithsonian. So these
awesome.
these interviews of different people in the Ozarks will get archived as kind of a history and overview of the Ozarks, but also to see, well, which ones would they select to represent the Ozarks in Washington, D.C. and give a kind of a feeling for what's the Ozarks about.
Okay. So is that going to be oral history, like audio recording, or is it going to be written?
My part is audio recordings. I mostly right now I've been doing Zoom interviews and recording
Awesome.
on Zoom. And then, I do some write-ups, but mostly it's interviews, just like we're doing right now.
Awesome. That's really great. Well, let's also just go back. How did you become an expert on Ozark plant life?
I think the simple answer is that I just love the plants of the Ozarks and all that means. And when I say plants, I don't just mean plants, I mean the entire web of interactions between whole different plants, habitats, the earth, why things grow in a certain place, why they grow in certain plant communities, how people interact with them. For me, that is such a fascinating topic that it just constantly led me forward.
When did you start really doing a lot of when did you like start teaching about plant life in the Ozarks?
Well, I started teaching about it when I got together with my partner, Mal Blossom. My partner was a midwife, and she came to the Ozarks in 1974, and she had a small homestead here and set up a midwifery business. And I met her in 1981, and this history is in that video, but I met her in 1981, and we fell in love, and I moved to the farm where I'm sitting and talking to you in Donovan, Missouri. And then as part of that business that she had as a midwife, I began to connect with healing herbs. And so it was sort of a bringing together of what before in my life had been an interest in plants. And then through a variety of mentors and other connections here in the Ozarks, going, oh, wow, these plants could be used for healing. And then in the early 1980s, when I was doing that, it was just kind of the herbal renaissance was just beginning. And so, I dived into it, and bit by bit taught myself, took classes, did a lot of hiking and a lot of herbal guides and so on.
Have you ever found any like old, like, I don't want to say ancient texts by any means, but old texts from the Ozarks that talk about how maybe the pioneers and people back in the day used to use herbs?
I can't say I found any from the Ozarks. I think most of that would be oral history. And I have met some people who have told me about their grannies who were, who had special skills with herbs. And a lot of times people will say to me, oh, I wish I'd paid attention when she was alive. But I don't really think there's much that was written down in that way at that time here in the Ozarks.
There's an episode of My Ozarks where we filmed near, it was in Frona, Missouri. Did you, and I remember you took some pictures of a book that had some herbs in it. Do you remember that?
I totally do. And I thought that was what you might be referring to. That book's not about the Ozarks. It's an amazing book. So you're talking about, the film we did on the German Ozarks.
Yes.
In Perry County. Anyway, there's that kind of living museum there, and they had a text, or not a text. It was an old manuscript, I think from the 1500s.
Yeah, it was old. I mean,
it was really old, and it was printed, but it was like the pictures were hand painted.
I remember looking at it because I wanted to be an archaeologist before I became a filmmaker. And I think that's why I like doing documentaries. But like, I remember looking at it and I was like, oh my God, this is old. And you're like, I know. And then you just started like taking pictures. And I was just like, this is so crazy how this is just sitting right here.
Exactly. And by a really famous herbalist. His name is Hieronymus Bosch. But
really?
He's, I think he was Swiss, I think. And then those Germans had brought that text over with them at some point when they came over to the United States.
Yeah. Well, and with that in mind, with what you saw, do you think that they probably adapted a lot of their stuff from that book when they were looking at plants around the Ozarks when they first came?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Me too. I mean, I've learned from a lot of those old books, and some of the plants that grew in Europe naturally grow here. And of course, some of the plants were just brought over and planted. Some of them escaped, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What is the most unique plant in the Ozarks biome to you?
Oh my gosh. That's such a question.
I have good ones every now and then. I even used a big word. I said biome. So it's real scientific there for a moment.
I don't know how to answer that, but what I will say is that the Ozarks is fascinating for anyone who's interested in plants because there's an enormous diversity of plants here. And to me, that's like when you say the most unique plant, my mind starts to go to some of those plants that, yeah, like I'm really fascinated by liverworts.
I love the names of some of these. That's so great.
So liverwort is a really ancient plant, really, really ancient. And you'll find it in creeks. It'll be growing flat on a rock. It'll kind of look almost like a leafy fern growing flat on a rock where the water is. And the reason it's growing that way is most plants that we talk about as plants now are what are called vascular plants. And that's a fancy word for saying that those plants are able to pick up nutrients and water and transport it up through the plant to its leaves. So very much like our own blood system, our own system of arteries and vessels, the plant is able to do that. But really ancient plants had no vascular system. So they had to absorb all of their water and nutrients directly into each and every cell.
Oh, okay.
So liverwort is laying flat on a rock where there's water because each and every cell needs to be in contact with nutrients and water to be absorbed into it directly.
Fascinating. And what do they use that liverwort for? Is there a specific thing that's used for?
I have heard of some uses, and right at the moment it's not coming to mind. It's not like a real common plant. I just think it's one of those, it's one of those plants you go, wow,
Unique.
look, there's a liverwort.
Unique.
It's like, oh, I'm being transplanted, I'm being transported back in time into a time before plants had gotten vascular systems.
Oh, that's true. That's interesting. So is there any plant, because I remember when we were filming and we didn't even use this scene in the film, or I think, I think we used a shot of it. We didn't like use the whole scene, but you got out one of those medicine bowls where you were smashing something together. And I can't remember for the life of me what plant it was, but you walked outside, grabbed it, and you just went in there, and Quentin, who is my good friend and director of photography, he just started filming, and we're just like, okay, just keep going. We just kind of went with it. I think it was kind of a minty.
Yeah, it was spearmint. Yeah, it was just
spearmint. Was a spearmint? Okay, that's what it was. I couldn't remember for the life of me what that was. But honestly, this is just me. I'd always seen it in movies, but I'd never seen a person in person actually using one of those bowls, and how there was a method to it, that how you were doing it. And before I knew it, you had made it into like a paste. And I just remember sitting there, like, even when I watched the video and fast forwarded to see how it happened, it's just, fascinating to me to see that. Because I mean, that's an old method of how they used to do it. But when it comes to certain plants, do you have anybody like that? Let's just say, is there certain plants that people ask you about, like if they have headaches or certain little ailments like that you recommend, or anything to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are many plants that'll help with healing in different ways. Of course, most people know, or a lot of people know, that aspirin was originally derived from a plant, which is willow bark. So there are, and the part of aspirin that's taken out of the willow bark is called salicylic acid, so salicin. And that word salicin comes from the Latin name for willow, which is salix.
Okay.
So salicin is in several other plants. It's also in wintergreen. I think it's in meadowsweet. So these are plants that used to be used for headaches and other kinds of pains like aspirin.
That's awesome. Wow. It's just real funny because when you think about certain things like aspirin, sometimes we don't think about the lineage of where that came from, and are there any and I know this is kind of another loaded question, but for any other, is there a specific ailment that comes to mind that you're amazed at that there's a plant that can help with that type of ailment that you can think of? I know it's kind of a wide range question there, but
Yeah, but actually there is. So I have taught about herbs for quite a bit of my career. I taught about herbs, and there were two things I always wanted to teach about. I wanted to teach about herbs that help the immune system, and I wanted to teach about herbs that help with, nervous system stuff. And one of the reasons I really like to teach about herbs for the immune system is that there are herbs that can do something for the nervous system, or I'm sorry, nerves that can do things for the immune system that we really don't have a conventional drug that can do it.
Okay.
So, for instance, most people have heard of echinacea. That's a herb. And what that plant will do is, when you take it, the way it acts in the system is it sort of alerts the human body's immune system to start to be active.
Okay.
And so if you have like a cold or something like that, and you take echinacea, then it activates the immune system, and the immune system, your own immune system, will take care of the cold. So the benefit of that is, of course, is that your own body is taking care of the problem. And sometimes, that's great. For instance, it can be an alternative for antibiotics, but what's really great is that, of course, antibiotics won't work on viruses. And, there was a time, and it's not happening as far as I know now, there was a time in my memory when antibiotics were given to people for viruses, and they don't work on viruses, and then they help to create antibiotic resistant pathogens, which is really a problem now. So there wasn't a really good way to treat viruses. There are some conventional drugs now for antiviral ones, but so you can take herbs that will help to deal with a virus in the body in a way that is, that's not harmful or stressful to most bodies.
Oh, really? So, like, if somebody has the flu, what would they
Somebody has the flu, they would take echinacea, right?
Echinacea and all that. Okay, interesting. Well, and then another question too: have you run into any trouble with people? Because I know some people aren't, like, when they hear about herbs and stuff, some of them are kind of anti-herbs. Sometimes they'd rather just take whatever. Have you ever had to deal with anything like that with people?
Well, sure. I mean, people have different belief systems, and sure, of course I do. And just, like, I'm sure you have people who aren't into interviews or aren't into movies or don't like the topics that you want to talk about. So I've just learned, just try to be respectful of people. If they want to learn something, then I want to share that knowledge. If they don't want to learn it, that's fine.
Okay. So, when it comes to the Ozarks, when we filmed your episode of My Ozarks, you were taking us all over the place. I remember I got quite the workout that day. You took us to a place, and what hooked me on saying, okay, we got to go see this, was you said, well, we're going to go to, is it Cupola Pond, or whatnot?
I call it Cupola Pond, but I think the right way to say it is cupola. Yeah.
So, and what hooked me when we were going to go see this, because it was about 25 minutes out of the way, if I recall, you said, this is literally an ancient swamp in the middle of the Ozarks. It literally, technically doesn't really belong there. Like, the closest one you said, was like down in Florida. I can't remember exactly what, but it's definitely out of place. And I was like, okay, we've got to see this. And I remember we were walking to it, and we were watching for snakes, because God, I hate snakes so much. I can't do it. And I was like, so where is it? So you were like, it's over the ridge over there. And so I got to the ridge, and I was looking down into it, and I was thinking, where is it? I can't. It literally looked like it just kept going down so deep. And I was like, Sasha, where is it? And you were like, it's right there. And I was like, what? And I remember I took like 10 more steps, and I finally came to an angle, I guess. and the water was so still, it was like a mirror, and it was giving me this optical illusion that it just kept going down like this gaping hole. And sure enough, it was literally looked like a swamp that you would see in Florida, just down this kind of cavern hole that was in the middle of, was was it, what county was that in?
In Ripley County.
It's in Ripley County, yeah. And Ripley County, and I was just blown away by it. And it even looked like a Hollywood set, like out of Star Wars, like Yoda was going to walk out of one of the trees and start waving sticks at me. But I just remember just being in awe of this place. And so this is what makes one thing that makes the Ozarks unique over, and in that direction especially. What is it? What is Cupola Pond, and how did it come to be there? What makes it unique?
Well, Jason, you're making me really happy because I just love to give people that experience. It's one of my favorite things. So the Ozarks is really fascinating because it has so many microhabitats in it, so many different habitats where different plant communities can thrive. And this comes about through the very, very interesting natural history of the Ozarks, which is the Ozarks is one of the areas above water for the longest time on Earth. So you can imagine what that means is it's been a place that different populations of plants and animals and of course human beings could live when other areas were under the water or under ice or different things like that. So anyway, that's a whole nother topic of what went into the development of the Ozarks. It just makes it the super diverse place. But you're talking about Cupola Pond in Ripley County. And yes, like to describe it, it's in this very ordinary patch of woods. Like you go down a couple of dirt roads, not very far off a paved road, and it's very ordinary, right? It's just some kind of scrubby looking oak trees. And then you park in a little parking lot and you take a really short walk. It goes up over a ridge and you look down and the water is so flat and it's dark because it is a swampy water. It's black. And you actually, still it happens to me, even though I know what's there, you don't realize you're looking down on water that's actually really pretty close. And you go like, okay, where is it? But what actually happened was, at a time when the Ozarks were actually a flat coastal plain, and this sort of habitat was very common. It's swamp habitat, and you can also see it over like in Mingo in the Boot Heel. You can see there's some swamps that look similar to it, but those aren't in the Ozarks. So anyway, at that time when this area was a flat coastal plain, probably what happened was a sinkhole collapse like that. And it provided a protected habitat for this little piece of swamp to remain. And then as conditions changed, and the Ozarks got much drier, got much less humid maybe, then the rest of the habitat around this sinkhole changed, but this little protected sort of protective cup allowed this little piece of swamp to remain right there, kind of basically in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, well, and you're right when you said that it was kind of like this protected habitat, because I mean, literally, it looks like it's a giant cone that's caved in all around it, and that it's very fascinating because it looks like something that you would see an alligator in, and I remember when we were filming, we were using the drone, but we were down so deep that he was having Jason Preston, shout out to him, and 417 drone for helping with this, but he was having trouble getting the signal to stay a certain thing. And I was like, oh man, please don't let this fall in the water. I don't want to have us going out in this swamp and getting the drone. Please just don't let it crash. And And you also took us to somewhere else besides Cupola Pond. Like you took us to I recall, and it the water was so blue.
That would be the Narrows we took. So some
Yeah.
of those, I think quite a few of the shots are at the Narrows, like that running water is an old mill. And then that amazing shot that the drone took of me standing on an outlook, and then it kind of zones out and you see the tops of the trees and you see that blue spring. That's all at the Narrows. Yeah.
Yes, that's the Narrows. And so was that all, if I can recall, was that all like natural spring water? Because I remember we got a shot where we're seeing the blue water, and then we could see the brown water of the river, the other river that it was kind of feeding into. So that was kind of a unique thing to see. So like, and I know we're talking about plants and stuff, but what is it natural spring water that was doing that effect, or did the plants and the water help with that around that area?
Well, it's a natural spring water, and what it is it's a spring. It's a pretty big spring. We've got so many beautiful springs in the Ozarks. But it's a fairly large spring called Blue Springs that feeds into the 11-Point River. And it's located so it's in Oregon County. It's right like close to the Ripley County line. And it's on Highway 142, right kind of near Ripley County line, but in Oregon County. So you can see where there's like a boat landing and so on. But yeah, that Blue Spring then flows down and it feeds into the 11-Point River.
So around that spring like that, do plants seem to thrive a little bit better around those natural springs, or is there anything unique about the plants that form around the springs like that?
Well, that's a really great question. What's really interesting is that there are plants specifically that have evolved to grow in spring water. So
okay.
Yes. So if you go to an Ozark spring, more than likely you'll see a certain set of plants that are adapted to grow in that cold, about 50-degree water. What's interesting about a spring, of course, is coming out of the earth. And so its temperature will stay about the same summer and winter, right? So it stays maybe about 50 degrees, and these plants will grow in it. And the water also, I think it has to do with oxygen in the water, or maybe minerals. I don't know. Somebody else who knows more about that would have the answer. But it's this gorgeous turquoise color, right? So there's something about those springs that's just breathtakingly beautiful. It's this gorgeous turquoise colored water, and then these brilliantly emerald green, lime green plants that are growing in the water. And then many times when I've been standing on that outlook, like you'll see in the episode, you'll see beavers swimming in the water.
Oh yeah. And again, guys, if you can, check out My Ozarks and check out episode 5 so you can see what we're talking about with the Narrows and with Cupola Pond. And is there, man, there's so many questions I could ask, because we asked so many questions too in the documentary itself, that episode. And you talked about how many different unique is it biomes, or what was the word you used that the Ozark has? Like you said, it had a lot of
ecotones. I think they're called bioregions or ecotones.
Bioregion. Okay, yes, thank you.
And different maps will tell you different things. So like this is not like
an exact
a law or anything.
Yeah.
But there are 5 huge ecotones that cross over in the Ozarks. So you have the northern forests, you have the southwest deserts, you have the eastern forests, you have I think the Gulf coastal. Right at the moment, I'm not remembering all of them, but they all cross right in the Ozarks. And what that means is, like when you think of those little Venn diagrams, those circles that overlap each other, it brings qualities of all those different ecotones to be in the Ozarks, where so you'll have, I've had people who come down from the Great Lakes area and they'll be going on a herb walk with me in the spring, and they'll say to me, wow, I mean, this looks like my Michigan forest. And I'll say, yeah, that's right, because that's that particular ecotone that you have up there in Michigan or up at the Great Lakes. And it's, you're right in the center of your ecotone there. So it's, everywhere is that habitat. But here, it'll only be in certain areas that are particularly cool or and shaded. And in the spring, you'll see these beautiful spring flowers. So those early spring flowers are related to that particular ecotone.
That's fascinating. And I also remember too, and I don't remember if you remember this, you were telling me too when we were, I even think before filming, that there was a spot that you liked going to. And I don't know if you were talking about mushrooms, I can't remember exactly, but there was a spot that you liked to go to because it was like a spot where everything kind of seemed to touch, like the different where you could find like a little bit of everything. I can't remember exactly what it was, so I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Well, I do hear what you're saying. I don't specifically have something coming to mind. I mean, the Ozarks is like that. So, yeah, but I do remember, what I do remember, Jason, is after we'd had a really long day and you and Quentin, the cameraman, and Ricky Maples, who was, I guess she was our director anyway. So it was a really small crew. It was during COVID. So it was just you, Jason, me, and Ricky were there. And I just basically dragged you everywhere. I was like, oh, you have to see one more place. And we were.
Oh, boy, I'm never going to live this down.
And we were standing at Cupola Pond, and I was like, yeah, but we haven't been to Coward's Hall yet, and it's really close. And I was so excited. I was just like, I was a kid at my birthday party. I was getting to show off all these places. And I remember you were so nice about it. And you said, oh, well, it's getting a little late and we have enough film, but if you really want to go, we'll go with you.
I'll never live that down. Every time I see you, you bring that story up.
I just thought, and I remember looking at you thinking, I'm going to take him there. And you were just, there was this beseeching look in everybody's eyes like, can we go home now?
But everything turned out great. We got a great episode out of it.
We totally did. You were so right. You were so right.
I'll never live that down. And what's funny is I think there's a picture that Quentin has, or somebody took of me, and and everybody's like, I think that's when Sasha was trying to get us to go to this one extra place. And I just have this weird look on my face, apparently. And I'm just like, oh, God, I am never going to live that down.
You were great. But do you remember what happened when we were driving away from Cupola Pond?
There was a snake.
Wasn't just any snake, was it?
Well, I didn't get close enough. I stayed in the car. I don't like snakes. It was a rattler, wasn't it?
It was. So your drone guy, maybe he still does, worked at Bass Pro, and he was a snake handler, right?
Yep.
And he was driving out ahead of us. He left a little earlier. He was not going to go to Coward's Hollow with us, right?
Oh, man.
So he was driving out ahead of us, and then we followed along later. We were really surprised. We saw his truck just sitting in the road, and I was like, "Oh, what happened? Did his truck stop?" And we pulled up behind him, and he had this long timber rattler draped over a stick.
Yep, and I was like, nope.
I remember it was long. I mean, I do have photos of it, but I think it was a good 6-8 feet long.
Oh yeah. And nope. I was not gonna get near that thing. I have a phobia, and I just can't do it. I stayed my distance, but Quentin's like, I'm gonna go get some video of it. I was like, go ahead. You can get all the video you want. I'll be back here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which I suppose is not a very good invitation for people to come down and visit, but you do very, very seldom see those
oh
very
yeah,
seldom.
I mean, as soon as I heard the rattle, I knew it was unique, but I did not I just, for me, who has a phobia of snakes, I couldn't do it. But that was the only snake we saw that day, so
Yeah,
I'll take that as a win.
there you go.
But yeah, I remember, Jason Preston, our drone guy, he was like, "Hey, Brazier, you want to come over here and look at it?" I'm like, "No, no." He goes, "I can bring it to you." I was like, "No, just stop. Please don't do this to me, please." Especially while Quentin's recording. you know. Um, so, but look, you know what? Let's talk about so what was the place that you wanted to take us that I'll never live down? What made it so unique to you?
Yeah, just someday you're gonna have to come down and go to it. Well, it's a place called Coward's Hollow, and it's also in Ripley County, and it's another Missouri conservation area, so it's very, very special, and it's what's called a chert shut-in. So a shut-in is a special kind of waterway. Most people will know about Jackson shut-ins. It's up closer to St. Louis.
Or is that
So if
Johnson? Is that Jackson?
Johnson, I'm sorry, you're right. You're so
Johnson.
right. Johnson shut-ins. So Johnson shut-ins, which quite a few people have seen, and you can is what's called rhyolite. So the rock, what happens is the water runs over bedrock, and there's no soil, and so it actually over many, many long period of time, the water carves kind of a chute into the hard rock. And so that's what a shut-in is. It's actual carved into hard rock. And so like a normal stream, you see sort of pebbles and earth and so on.
Yeah, this is just water's kind of eating away at it over the centuries.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. So there's another kind of rock called chert, which is also really, really hard. And most people may have heard of chert. Another word for chert is flint. So you can make arrowheads out of flint.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of chert in the Ozarks, and this particular place, Coward's Hollow, is a chert shut-in. So that means that water has flowed over that super hard chert rock, and it's formed a chute. It's formed a kind of a chute out of the chert. And at certain times of year, right after a rain, there's gorgeous waterfall there. It's got some interesting history. There's a sinkhole that's collapsed, and it's left part of a cave. And I think the history Coward's Hollow comes from, it was a place where, people would hide out. Maybe they were hiding out. They didn't want to fight in the Civil War, or maybe they were criminals. Who knows why they would hide out? But they would hide out in that cave. And when you walk down to where this all is, and you go and you look in the cave, you can see the smoke on the ceiling. Of course, I think probably some people would start a little fire there now, but you can feel that old energy there.
Oh, really? Well, that's cool. Well, I'll definitely have to make up for that and come down and see that. Definitely. We're talking about, were there any other places that you were wanting to take us besides that? Because I remember you mentioned a few of them besides that one.
Oh, I've got so many places. There are so many cool places in the Ozarks. That's one of the things. I remember I had a photographer friend once, and I just took her in the truck like you, and I just took her from place to place to place to place to place. There's a place up in, I think it's in Carter County, called Rocky Falls. It's really gorgeous. And I hope I'm getting all these names right. I didn't look them up before this, but they're also near Rocky Falls. There's a place called, I think it's called Falling Springs. And it was still's got an old cabin there. It was a place for an early mill. And there's a big bluff, and the water is sort of dripping and falling off of that. And there's a little pond reservoir there with a cabin. It just has a very unusual, protected feeling. It's very moist. A lot of these places for me are kind of about the mood that you find there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and it's just like ever since we did your episode, every location we've gone to, you've always pointed out some unique things that I probably wouldn't have noticed unless you were there. talking to me about it. And I know the last episode we did on Cat Robinson, there was a lot of you were helping us find the tree root that I wanted to film, and you found it down near a river, and it looks beautiful in how it turned out. But is there any place, like when people come to you and they ask about your guidance on herbs of the Ozarks, is there any particular topic that is like the most popular when people come to you when they ask about herbs?
People are really interested in ginseng
Okay.
and golden seal. Yeah.
Okay. And for people who don't know, what would those be used for?
Ginseng is a plant. It's got a special name. It's called an adaptogen.
Okay.
And what an adaptogen is used for is it somehow helps the body to cope with stress.
Oh, okay.
So ginseng is one of those. And then golden seal, which has its name if you dig up the root, which actually for plant people who are listening to it, it's not actually a root, it's a rhizome.
Uh-huh.
But if you dig that up and you break that root or that rhizome, it's got brilliant golden yellow juice in it.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's how it got the name golden seal. But it's really good for digestive complaints. It will be used in it's a strong bitter, so it'll also have some anti-inflammatory properties to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Wow. I mean, I got so many questions. I could probably keep doing this forever with you because you'll have an answer and a plant for all of them, I know. But is there anything that we haven't talked about with the Ozarks and plant life that you'd like to talk about? Anything that I've missed?
I think not really. For people who are interested in this topic, I did maybe want to say there's a book I like. It's an old book, but it's still available through Department of Resources, DOR, I think it is, but it's called Missouri Landscapes, A Tour Through Time by John Hawker. And I find it just wonderfully and easy to read about how the Ozarks came to be the way they are. And it's almost got a mythic quality to it about this really ancient plateau that rose above the sea, very hard red rocks so that it never completely eroded away, got covered up by numerous layers of sediment through countless seas, that eventually is almost like a cake, like with lots and lots of different layers. And then as those layers, which were softer than the bedrock, would erode away, it would leave all sorts of different kinds of minerals behind. So this whole amazing evolution, which I'm only just barely touching on as I speak now, has just created this unique place that basically so many different plants could find some place that they could do well. And I think I do touch on it in the episode, but I find that there's some sort of mirroring of that in the people who live in the Ozarks, that I think people don't realize how many different cultures find home here in the Ozarks.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't know until I began doing these interviews with the Smithsonian how many different cultures there are.
Oh, okay.
For instance, something I didn't know, and maybe I think maybe you do, maybe some of our listeners do, but some don't. We have the largest population of people from the Marshall Islands living anywhere outside of the Marshall Islands. We have the largest population living in Northwest Arkansas.
Really?
Yep. The Marshallese community there. And there's also just a little bit south of me in Pocahontas, Arkansas, there's another smaller population of Marshallese. So their place has become, the Marshall Islands really very sadly are not as good a home as they used to be. One, because of climate change and sea rise, but also because this really terrible history of the testing of the nuclear bomb there in the 1950s.
So was that near Bikini Atoll?
Exactly, it was part
Okay.
of that. Anyway, so a lot of their islands became contaminated. Their food systems became contaminated. And so there's a special agreement between the Marshall Islands and the United States. The people from the Marshall Islands can come here, you know,
because of what we did, essentially.
Because of what we did, exactly.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that there was such a large population of Marshallese.
I didn't either, because I mean, and for people who don't know, that's kind of it's between Hawaii and the Philippines in the northwest. Bikini Atoll is largely it's trying to look at what I looked up here. Undisturbed waters. So it's definitely a ship graveyard after World War II. So that's interesting. I didn't know that either. That's very fascinating. That sounds like a My Ozarks episode.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. So
That's fascinating.
It's around it's based around Bentonville, in Arkansas, and you know, just north of Fayetteville, Arkansas.
So based on everything we've just talked about, not only is the Ozarks diverse in plant life, we have a diverse community of different ethnicities and just people from all around. And I will say that working with you guys and with My Ozarks too also opened like to places I never said, like I never would have gone. I never would have known about Frona, Missouri, and the German heritage there. And it was just fascinating because they have that, like you said, it's an outdoor museum, and it was just stepping in time filming in some of those buildings. And it's just I'm always amazed what new thing I learn every time I do a documentary on whoever it is or whatever. And I think that's always part of the process that's enjoyable. It's not about what you know when you do a documentary, it's also what you're going to learn and find out as you're doing it. And even now, it's always a pleasure talking to you because I always learn something new and fascinating, and I love hearing you know, about stuff I don't know and that may be right underneath my feet that I don't even realize. So let's give a quick shout out to so the Smithsonian, their website. I believe it's just this. I think it's just si.edu. That's the Smithsonian Institution. And
I think if people would just do a web search for the Smithsonian Folklife Festival for 2023, they'll find it.
Excellent. Yeah. And let's do a shout out too to Ozarks Vitality. They are the ones behind the My Ozarks series, and we hopefully will have a new episode coming soon, shooting for that. And is there any other websites or groups that you want to give a quick shout out to for that deal with plant life or anything that we haven't mentioned?
No, I think that's good. Those are good places to start. Those are really good places to start.
Well, fantastic. Sasha, it is always a pleasure talking to you.
You too, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you. You have a good one. All right.